Hi folks. The Senate just passed a $1.7 trillion omnibus bill, and one of the elements has to do with a program that we model at PolicyEngine. It's the SNAP emergency allotments. So I'm going to show you from start to finish how we can model the parts of that legislation in our PolicyEngine platform. So first thing, I'm just going to pull up the actual legislation. So omnibus bill, and let's actually say text. All right, so you can see I've looked at this before. This is a big bill. It's got 4,000 pages, but I will save you some of the searching. Essentially, a lot of it has to do, well, this provision is in the summer EBT program section, which is down here around page 3,900. So it's actually at the very bottom there. So, offsets. Okay, so a couple offsets. One of them has to do with how the summer EBT program worked up until now, which has to do with the public health emergency. So it's sort of covering that. But the part that we're interested in for this change is the allotments. So the Families First Coronavirus Response Act created the opportunity for states to apply for emergency allotments. And this sunsets that after the issuance of February 2023 of emergency allotment benefits. Okay, so let's go back to the PolicyEngine homepage, go to the GitHub organization, and we can go into the PolicyEngine US repo. This is the Python package where all of our policy rules are implemented, and it powers all of our US app, API, front end, etc. Okay, so let's make a new issue. This issue is going to be end SNAP emergency allotments effective March 2023 upon signing of the omnibus bill. So this is expected probably to happen tomorrow, that it'll pass the House and Biden will sign it. But let's just drop in the page number. So this is page 3975. Page equals 3975. So that'll go straight there. And let's copy the text as well so we can just be clear about what this is doing. So this under the summer EBT program section, it says, all right, submit new issue. Okay, so we're going to take it, sunset it as of March 2023. Now let's go into VS Code. So I have my repo up here. I was actually just looking at the SNAP emergency allotment formula. But essentially here is the Python package. So the core package here is PolicyEngine US. We've got folders for the parameters. That's basically every number that's in the law. Tests as well. We'll actually start with the test. And the variables is where the logic happens. And that's essentially NumPy syntax. But to actually make this happen, I'm going to, whoops, wrong place. I'm going to go into the GitHub tab, look at my recent issues. So it's here. I just hit refresh to make sure. And this is now assigning me to the issue, creating this new branch, Max Guinness issue 1591, that corresponds to the issue we just made. So we'll be able to easily incorporate this issue into the pull request. Okay, so as I mentioned, first thing we should usually, or we really always try to do, is test-driven development. So let's go in, and I think that's here. Yeah, tests. Okay, so our test folder is structured the same way as our variables folder. And that's pretty intentional because every variable that has a formula, we're going to have a unit test for that. So in this case, the variable that we care about is SNAP emergency allotment. So that's a variable, we're not really going to change any of the logic. We're going to change the parameters, in particular, which states have it in effect. But we can add a couple tests that will capture that failure. And in particular, I think we wrote this initially when lots of states had the emergency allotments, so we didn't specify the states. That was kind of an oversight, so I'm just going to add the state code as California for each of these. And the way this works is basically each of these bullets, each of the items is a unit test. So we've got the name of the unit test, the thing we're testing. So in this case, we think that someone should get, if they're eligible for SNAP and they have a certain minimum expected contribution, the maximum allotment's 3, minimum is 1, well, that would only normally give them a difference between the max and the min, which is going to be smaller than the $95 minimum emergency allotment. So they would get a full 95 times 12 months emergency allotment. So first thing, I'm just going to copy California because that was really the intent for all of these unit tests. And if we run make test, this should not change anything. So make test is going to run our full test suite. So every YAML file here is going to run. This also happens as we file new pull requests. While that's running, I'm going to just jump into the actual variable so we can see why we need the state and roughly how this program works. Okay. So the emergency allotment, what it does is it makes sure that if you're eligible for any amount of SNAP, you will get the maximum allotment for your household size. And if the difference between what you would normally get and the maximum allotment is less than $95, you'll get a $95 emergency allotment that month. So every variable in PolicyEngine is a class that inherits from the variable class as well. So here we also point to the part of the law that establishes it, and every variable has a formula. So, or a variable that isn't just a pure input has a formula. So we first check, are they eligible for SNAP? If so, what's the maximum allotment and what's the normal allotment that they would get if they under the normal rules without the emergency allotment. Then we're going to check their state and see if, based on this parameter file, which we're about to adjust, is the emergency allotment in effect in their state, and what is the minimum, so that's that $95 times the month and the year. If it's in effect, then we're going to check, does the difference between the max allotment and the normal allotment, is that less than $95? If so, we'll give them 95. And then ultimately we return their eligibility multiplied by basically checking if they're eligible and the EA is in effect, then the EA amount if it's in effect. Okay, so it looks like everything's passing. So I'm going to just make this its own mini commit. So I'll call this add state code to existing EA unit tests. All right. So now we're going to add a test that should fail. SNAP emergency allotments end in March 2023. A California eligible household should not get an EA in 2024. Whoops, 2024. Okay. So we can have, it looks like GitHub Copilot's getting this right. So period 2024. Basically every period always selects as of January 1st of that year. So that's why we need to check 2024. So if they're eligible, and actually we don't need the expected contribution, we just need the SNAP normal allotment. So if the snap normal allotment is 1 and then 3, snap, basically this is the same case as before. So they should get some emergency allotment. And if in effect, they would get some, but it's not going to be in effect. So we can either run the full make test, or we can just run straight to this test using the PolicyEngine core test function. So that's going to go into PolicyEngine US tests, policy baseline, gov, USDA, snap, emergency allotment. And we have to specify the country. Okay, so this last one I think should fail. Okay, good. Yeah, so that is exactly what we want. So add failing test capturing intended behavior. So now our job is to pass this test. And the way we're going to do that is by adjusting the parameter of whether it's in effect in California and also every other state. So gov, USDA, snap, emergency allotment in effect. So here's where we have every state. A lot of states have already ended. So Alaska ended the emergency allotment in May. But all the other states we're going to have to set this to end in March of 23. So 2023, 03, 01, false. Okay, we're just going to do that in the remaining states. Another way to do this, which might be cleaner, and maybe we'll come back to it, is to have a separate federal parameter, which basically overrides this. That would be closer to the law. It's a bit more work, so I'm just gonna skip it here. And I should also credit snapscreener.com, which has produced the values for each of these laws. For each of these states. They have a data set that tracks the policy changes, which states have done emergency allotments, and when they have concluded them. Okay. Okay, and last thing we'll do here is have an extra reference. Okay, so if we go back to where we were here, we'll copy this link and go back. Okay, so title is, what was this? The Consolidated Appropriations Act, I think. Okay. And now this should just pass the test, actually. So if you rerun this, okay, great, we passed the test. Update EA end dates in all states. And the last thing we're going to do is add a changelog entry. So this is what goes into our semantic versioning. So every time we have a new version or a new pull request that we merge into master, we update the version, we add to the changelog, and that's all based on this YAML file. And it's not name, it's bump. So you can look at prior pull requests to see the structure of this. But essentially this is going to be a minor bump because it does sort of add new functionality. It's not fixing a change. So changes added, snap emergency allotment and dates per Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023. Okay, and last thing we usually do is a make format. So I don't think we have really changed anything here, but just to check. Okay, add change log entry. And now we can publish branch, publish this to my own username. And now if we go to pull requests, you can do this from VS Code. I usually just do it from GitHub, but compare pull requests. So add snap emergency allotment dates per consolidated. And this fixes number 1591. So if you use that fixes keyword, that's going to close the issue once we merge it in. Okay, I'm going to make this a draft, even though this is, from a code perspective, this is ready to merge. We're not going to merge it until the bill passes. So actually, I'm going to edit the description. Until signed by President Biden. Okay, so at this point, all of our automated checks will run. There's nothing in here since we ran the test locally. We can actually run a make test locally as well, but I suspect everything will run here just fine. But it also checks that the version has been provided correctly with changelog entry YAML file, checks that the formatting is correct, which we got going well with make format. And so this usually takes about 5 minutes or so. And at that point, it will be ready to merge. So that is how we go from start to finish in implementing a new policy or revising a policy in PolicyEngine. Cheers.